welcome back, listeners, to the BizBlend podcast, the show where business meets human brilliance. Now, today's episode is all about a trait that might just be the most underrated asset for leaders in the age of AI. Guess what? Emotional intelligence. How do we connect in a world that feels increasingly disconnected? How do leaders read the emotional undercurrent of their teams or customers when Zoom boxes and chatbot scripts dominate? To unpack this, I am joined by someone who brings a fascinating blend of performance psychology and real world leadership listeners. Meet Dr. Albert Bramante. Let me share a bit about Albert with all of you. So, he's a seasoned talent agent who has spent over 20 years in the entertainment industry, helping actors land major roles from Broadway to blockbuster TV shows, while also helping them overcome psychological barriers like self sabotage, imposter syndrome, and then the fear of success. And with a PhD in psychology, plus certifications in hypnosis and NLP, he doesn't just scout talent, he empowers transformation. And today we are exploring how leaders can apply emotional intelligence or EQ not just to understand others, but to truly lead in the human centric way this digital world needs more than ever right now. So now, Dr. Albert, you can say I'm so sorry. It was a long intro, but yeah, please.
I really appreciate, Sana, the intro and for you to be gracious enough to invite me on this podcast and have this really important discussion, on the topic of emotional intelligence and the balance between technology and the human connection.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm really, really surprised. Really, um, it really is kind of fascinating how your journey has been. I mean, from Broadway, something really very creative, to boardrooms. I mean, you have helped actors tap into emotional authenticity. Um, so, what kind of, how exactly do you apply experiences of Broadway um, or acting, blending that emotional authenticity into acting into something as practical, um, number centered in boardrooms?
Sure. Well, we're all playing roles in this sense. I mean, whether, with actors, I, work with them and try to secure work, as on a business side, trying to represent them. So my job as employment agent is to try to find them work. But I also find in the process is dealing with working with their mindset. And when it comes to auditions, when it comes to interviews, when it comes to meetings, the important thing is to have a good understanding of your emotions because, and again, I'm not gonna rehash too much about a growth mindset because that's been talked a lot about, but in order to do that, you have to have a strong control of your emotion, and that's where emotional intelligence comes in. The ability to understand and manage your own emotions as well as to connect with other people. And even in the acting world, good actors not only play the role very well, but they also connect to their scene partner. And the same thing goes in business. If you're in the boardroom or you're working and managing, a team of people, the important thing is to connect with your colleagues, to fully connect to whether it's your employees, your colleagues, your teammates, and that is going to much impact your success in the boardroom just as much as your knowledge of number crunching and all that, or sales and all that. Now, the important thing is people buy from people. The thing about sales, if you look at sales, for instance, the human being, the average consumer gets turned off when something appears too salesy. There's no, like, where it's just sales without emotion or sales without connection, we automatically tune out. It's a natural filter. So we buy from people that we trust. In order to trust, we have to have emotional connection. And so, just like it is with an actor trying to connect their scene partner to give a great performance, to the person sales leader trying to up their sales, portfolio or the quarterly sales. The important thing is to connect with your audience, to connect with the customer, to connect with your partner and your team. So connection is important. Authenticity is important. All of these things are essentially important for connecting to your team.
That is absolutely true. Absolutely true, and very, very well put, Dr. Albert. Um, and this is really, really, I don't know. Personally, it's really, really interesting, striking for me, um, because the worlds are different. But then, um, what comes to my mind is, we are completely into the digital world. The current generations, they were born into the digital world, and it's more of right now, there's so many emotions around, or expectations around, um performances, numbers, instant numbers, quick results, quick fixes. I mean, even if, let's say a company or a leader is aware about, um, emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
it looks good on paper, but it sometimes fails in execution. And similar to sometimes, the concept of a movie or a play looks good on paper, but when executed, it doesn't quite come out the way it was expected. So, why do you think it is required? Emotional intelligence. What is right now not working, and how should we approach it differently? I mean, there are the three questions in one, but yeah.
Well, I think we outlined where an idea looks good on paper, or a play or movie looks great on paper, the dialogue, the storyline. There's a piece that's important. Number one is the authenticity factor. Do you truly believe a message? And part of being able to deliver is to be able to believe your message and to fully embrace the message that you're giving. So, like, if you're in a company, working on a company, you have to believe in the product, and fully, you know, with all your being able to do that. Not only is belief important, but also being emotionally there and emotionally present. Because if I'm presenting, or if I'm doing anything, performing or doing anything else, and let's say I'm so wrapped up in something that happened to me last week, or a fight I got in with my family member or spouse,
Mhm.
what's going to wind up happening is that's going to take away from the performance, or the execution of that idea, and it's
Mhm.
going to come off, it's going to flop in a sense. And that's why, if there's no real true connection between, the actors and the writers and the script, or the company in the boardroom, if there's no connection to the product or to each other, it's going to flop, and therefore it's going to come off as inauthentic. And right away, the audience is just going to say, "I don't want to hear this," or the board of directors or whatever you're presenting to, is going to say something's not adding up here. Something is not right. I don't feel comfortable with this, because you're not fully embracing whatever it is you're doing. So this is another piece of why our emotions really are crucial here, because if we're going to really embrace and truly convey a message of a company or a product, we have to do it with 100%, with intention, um, and not only just, fulfilling the motions, going through the motions, because then we're just on automatic pilot. We're just saying, I'm doing a presentation, but you can tell automatically sometimes that people are doing a presentation, whether they're doing it just because they have to, or they're doing it because they authentically love what they're talking about, or passionate what they're talking about. And so I think that's is what really separates from what works well,
Mhm.
uh, both in all aspects, or on the other hand, of what what seems well on paper, but fails or flops in the execution of it.
Hmm. Makes sense, Dr. Albert. Okay, now let's move on to the current scenario. So we saw this in the pandemic, um, post pandemic as well. So in a world of automations, AI generated responses, chatbots, Slack threads, and all, reading emotions is really becoming trickier, Dr. Albert, and we all have been struggling with this. I mean, not only from a leadership perspective, but I believe as a colleague or a manager, um, a mentor, mentee. What techniques do you recommend for leaders specifically to decode emotional cues in a digital first environment?
Well, this is definitely very tricky because
Mhm.
when we're in a digital environment, we can censor what we want to say, because there's that planning of it. And while AI is automation is great, it lacks the emotion.
Mhm.
And so that's why very often the most savvy people can determine if, like, you're sending a document, whether it was written by AI or by a human being, because you can tell by if there's no personality player here, it's an AI generated document. So what I often say is, as challenging as it is, we need to get in person somehow, whether that is a hybrid model, and because I kind of think the pandemic definitely changed things. I don't think we're gonna ever go back to where it was prior to that. You know, I but I still think we need to do, whether it's a hybrid arrangement where companies will have maybe one day a week or 1 or 2 times a month, like mandatory in person,
Mhm.
uh, where you connect. And then if you can't make it in person, video conferencing, so you're seeing everybody's face.
Mhm.
Uh, and then requiring, when you are video conferencing, everyone to turn their camera on. Um, so that is that connection. Because otherwise, again, it becomes inauthentic. And one of the things that they really didn't talk about during the pandemic, I mean, obviously the world shut down because of safety, and that was well understood. But there was also a lot of people, there was a secondary pandemic of mental health capacity. A lot of people were having such a hard time being disconnected. The depression rate, skyrocketing. Substance abuse skyrocketed. Alcoholism skyrocketed because of the isolation. To human beings, our DNA has never changed. Even though how much automation comes in, our DNA will never change, and that our DNA requires us to be socially active, meaning connections, authentic, human connections, and something that AI will not, I don't think will ever be able to provide to you. And so I think that when we, talked before, there's that balance between, relying on AI too much
Mm.
to the point where, you're lacking, you're preferring that over human contact. That may be a problem or problematic. However, at the same time, not adopting or, like, being totally anti AI is also going to be a problem too.
Mhm.
Because it's just like it's the I would say the AI is like the internet of like the 2020, of the 21st century. I
Mhm.
remember, again, I'm dating myself here, but I'm from the generation where I remember the internet being introduced. And
Wow.
I remember people being resisting the internet. I don't
Mhm.
want to do it. Now, if you can't really be a productive human being without the internet. And I think the same thing's gonna happen with AI.
Absolutely, absolutely. And history always teaches us so many lessons to be prepared for the future. So you really kind of hit home by mentioning that although for some it will be like quickly embracing, for some it will be slowly and gradually embracing, but it's more about the intention being us um, using AI, not AI using us. So
Yes.
with that, Dr. Albert, before we started this show, we kind of were discussing that uh, how AI will not replace us, but someone who knows, not knows, but uh, who knows how to use it, they will replace. But it's not about it's kind of a balance that we have to create, not overusing AI, but then not using AI at all. So what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, well, I think, the sense of using it as an aid, as a tool to complement
Mhm.
what you're doing, not as a replacement of what you're doing. Um, like for example, I use AI for research, for idea generation, um, or to augment stuff that I'm doing, like increase what maybe like if I'm sending out an email or message, I might compose the message myself and then maybe run it through AI and say, how can I improve this? And then to give me those ideas, and then I'll revise it myself, put my own interpretation to it, and then send it out. So I think using it as an aid to complement what you're doing, but you have to know how to use it, and um, again, using it as a tool, not as a replacement. So
Mhm.
and I think it's important just to learn AI because again, if you're working in sales, if you're working in business, there's a lot of stuff that it can even help you automate stuff that might be tedious or busy work. So,
Mhm.
so it's like it's about pivoting and just adapting. I mean, just like with the pandemic, we all had to adapt to Zoom.
Mm.
You know, and there was a lot of pushback with that. I remember that. Like, no, Zoom can't replace everything, but we had to. We had no choice. And I think the same thing is happening with AI. We have to pivot and learn to use it, but use it in a smart way and in a more effective way to complement what you're doing, not to take over everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let's get back to emotional intelligence, Dr. Albert. So, um, for a matter of fact, I have learned this, that emotional intelligence starts with self awareness, because if we have a closed mind, it's really difficult to embrace, first of all, accept that I may not be emotionally or empathetic towards my people, my team members, or my partners. So, what are some signs that a leader may be emotionally reactive or disconnected, and how can they begin shifting toward emotional regulation?
Sure. Well, the important thing is taking things personally. So, again, there's going to be turnover in every business. There's going to be, missed opportunities because we're human. Everyone's going to make mistakes. So I think being disconnected of I think, the bottom line obviously is very important in any business. But I think if you are solely focusing on the bottom line and not even asking your employees, like, how are you doing today? I would say start small by talking to your, employees, how is their day going? And then even ask them, how can I help you? Rather than being, a micromanaging standpoint, just ask them how they're doing and start including them in ideas in the company. You might have, especially, if you have someone who's a Gen Zer, for instance, in the Gen Z population who may be great with social media. They may have some wonderful ideas.
Yes.
Incorporate them, welcome them, and try them out. And I think if you're a leader that is open to listening, and let's say you're coming up with new company policies or maybe drafting company handbook, involve the team in that process. Ask them for their input, a
Mm.
suggestion box, or a private schedule, private one-on-one meetings, once a month or once every 2 months, with the intention of not necessarily micromanaging, but just, "Hey, how are you doing?
Exactly.
What did you experience here?" Because the important thing is, employees stay with the company when they feel that their CEO or their management understands them and supports them, and is not looking them as an assembly line or a bottom line or just a numbers thing. So, if you feel yourself getting disconnected, or usually frustrated or reactive, emotionally reactive, like getting upset or getting angry very easily, then it's time to take stock in what you're doing now. Maybe that means, maybe even yourself taking some time off, stepping away a bit, even if it's for a couple of days or a week. Like I'm a big believer in work-life balance. So, take your vacation time, each year when you get that in the company. Get spend some time away from work. Even with my actors, like I tell them, you know, don't be so focused on acting 24/7. Have other hobbies and passions.
Exactly. Yes. 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 Sometimes it really gets them into that rabbit hole.
Yeah, or it's like that hamster on a hamster wheel that just keeps, you know, putting all their energy and not getting any results. So the important thing is to sometimes recharge. If you find yourself getting emotionally reactive, recharge. Do whatever it is that make you happy. Step away for a couple days and then come back and say, "Look, okay, now I'm ready." But the important thing is to, involve your colleagues and your team members and your employees in the decision of the company and really convey to them that their message is important to you. And not just in a superficial way, but really mean that.
Lovely. Lovely, Dr. Albert. This was really, really useful, personally for me as well. Um, okay, now a bit of a different. Let's take look at this from a different perspective. So
Mhm.
another school of thought that says that emotional intelligence is innate. Some people say, "I don't have emotions at all. I'm absolutely pragmatic, logical, rational." Um, and sorts of like that. You either have it or you don't. So but given your background in psychology, Dr. Albert, I imagine you would argue it can be developed. I'm just assuming. So what tools or mindsets they help leaders grow this capacity over time, if it is possible?
Sure. Um, well, I think that's a misconception when somebody says, "I don't have any emotions." I'm worried about that. Those are the people I'm really worried about, concerned about, because those are the people that are trying to bury their emotions. Now, maybe they've had some past trauma in their life, so they're wanting to repress it, or they received a message in their life of, well, hey, I need to be okay with
Mhm.
things. I need to be okay with things. And so I think the important thing is to take stock in your emotions, because we're human beings. We're going to experience emotions. We're going to be affected by things. Now, and I'm not to get too stereotypical, but I see this more common in male, males about I must present, stoic, it's all business and no time for weakness. And the important thing is to reframe that and say, look, actually admitting to your emotions and being vulnerable is a sign of strength, a sign of courage. And people are going to be more likely to connect to a leader or CEO that is human, you know,
Mhm.
and, they might have some short term
Okay.
connections to things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
However, there's going to be, eventually some that time it's going to catch up. So you may be successful in the short term, but then you're gonna be, having for a nervous breakdown or a health, crisis, even a physical health crisis.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there have been, I mean, time to time, there have been. cases and case studies like that, and uh, you rightly mentioned. I mean, that's the short term is the key word. I mean, something which where you're not considering how your team is perceiving. You may be not communicating properly with them. You are completely hell bent on achieving something. It may work in the short term, but the long term implications, they could be detrimental to the longevity of whatever you are doing.
Yeah, 100%, and it will affect the longevity, life longevity, and that's why, like, they've done studies and a lot of research, psychological research backs this up. What we're referring to right now is like what we call a type A personality, which is the high intensity, you know, uh, no time to be laid back, a lot of anxiety. So what can often happen there is it raises cortisol when you're in that stressful high, stakes all the time. You're raising cortisol in your body. And that cortisol eventually is going to start attacking the internal organ, your heart, your lung, your cardiovascular system. And that's why, unfortunately, that there's a link, a strong link between type A and heart attacks. So again, emotional intelligence is not nice to have. It's vital for our health.
Mm.
Sure. The best way to do that is through LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn under Albert Bramante. I'm also on Instagram. You can reach me there. You can also reach me on the website, albertbramante.com. And I'd love to hear from you. Love any insights or, continue this conversation. I would love to do that.
Lovely. I'll make sure to have all the details in the show notes, Dr. Albert. And thank you so much for not only bringing psychological insight, but such a human lens to
Yes.
this conversation.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, it was great. And we need to have more conversations like this,
Absolutely,
especially.
absolutely, absolutely, uh, and this needs to uh, spread as wide as possible. So, I would urge to all of my listeners. I mean, irrespective of your role in the organization, and whether it needs to be get on. So, just share the word with your friend, your colleague, or across your peers or anyone, because it's definitely clear from this conversation that in this age of AI and automation, the most powerful thing a leader can do is stay connected to themselves and then to others as well. So, with that, this is your host, Sana, signing off from BizBlend. Refer to the show notes to connect with Dr. Albert Bramante and stay curious, stay connected. Until next time, keep blending brilliance with heart here on BizBlend. Thank you.